Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name is Rory Paquette. I am, as always, your very, very incredibly grateful host. Thank you all for being here today. I love this. I love my job. I love you guys. I would not be here and be able to do this for a living if it wasn't for every one of you listening, following, commenting, subscribing. You folks are making this dream happen. So thank you so very much. And we have an awesome guest for you tonight. You guys are going to just fall over when you start hearing this guy's story and everything he has to offer. Um, I knew he'd be early. I just knew he'd be early, and I'm leaving that as a little teaser for the next few minutes, and I'll explain that once we get going. But if you're a friend of the program, you know what comes next. We got to pay a couple of bills, so time for a sip of our preferred beverage. Oh my goodness gracious. That is so good. You guys, it's absolutely delicious. And if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, you know what we're drinking. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. Absolutely fantastic coffee. They brew a mean bean and they do all the right things for all the right reasons. And they support veterans like we do, which is why we support them. Go look them up at Freedom Hill Coffee and tell them Power Man sent you. Now, we're done with the commercial aspect. Let's get into the podcast. Got a great guy here tonight. And I'm going to give you a little hint. He's a former Ranger. So I knew that this guy was going to be on early when I started up. And I told my wife, I said, honey, I got to get going because this guy's going to be on early. So I got to jump on. And I jumped on and he was already there, even with me getting early. So please welcome to the program the host of the Ready to Fight podcast, Bruce Kimbrell. Bruce, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being on. I got to tell everybody what to expect. You already are one of the most humble guys I've ever interviewed. I got to tell you that right now.
Well,
I mean, every time I try and get something out of you, you're like, no, 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 it's not about me. And I love that. I love that. And I think that's a big, big crux of your podcast. But tell everybody who you are, what your podcast is, and why you're here.
all right. So I'm Bruce Kimbrell. The podcast is Ready to Fight podcast. And the reason I chose that is it's not my sole focus, but I do focus on military, law enforcement, first responders. And in that type of environment, we've got to train and we always have to be ready for what I would say the fight, right? Military is focused on the war aspect, law enforcement is focused on the streets, and first responders are focused on anything that comes their way. And so we train, and we're always ready to fight. And the same aspect is that how important it is to do those jobs. I look at it from a different perspective, from a spiritual perspective. And for me, I'm a Christian. And the Bible tells me that the adversary roams around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And so that just tells me right there that no matter what, where you're at, you always have to be ready. And the only way to do that is through Ephesians 6, where it says, put on the whole armor of God. And so to do that, we need to train. We need to train ourselves spiritually for this spiritual warfare. And so that's the objective of my podcast, Ready to Fight podcast.
That's fantastic. I mean, that really is. I love the fact that it's faith based. I noticed that right away when I was looking at your profile. The I didn't ask you this in the pre-interview, but I got to ask you now because he's a friend of mine. He's one of our avid listeners. Do you happen to know the guys over at Whitfield Barbershop by any chance? They follow you like crazy and they love you.
I do. Yes, I'm very good. Actually, Aaron will be coming on here pretty soon. I don't want to give that away, but yes, Aaron and I have a good history together.
I love it. See, they both are followers of ours. And a lot of my people who listen to this know those guys, over there. And so I love giving Lonnie a shout out whenever I can and his son Aaron. So I
That's
just
awesome.
I wanted to do that on the air because they deserve it because they're fantastic guys. But I just thought that was so cool that they, that they knew you and were going to do that. I didn't realize you were going to have them on. So, well, when this comes out, they're gonna know. So
Oh yeah.
cat's out of the bag now, brother. But
Yes, sir.
I do. I digress. I love that there's that connection there. Now, give everybody a little idea of who you are, your background, military service. What led you into the military service in the first place?
Oh man, that's a good question. So I've got one family member that I really looked up to, and he is former military. and he was an 82nd Airborne. And so growing up, my dad and us, we would always hang out over at my Uncle Dan's house. And that was just kind of like the precursor. You know, as kids, you grow up and you're like, man, I really want to do law enforcement, firefighter, be a, something of that nature. And so being around my uncle, I always got to hear, some of his military stories. And of course, he always loved to watch military movies or whatever at his house. So that was kind of the initial driving factor. But the ultimate factor was when 9/11 happened. I remember sitting in a Christian school, 9/11 had happened. Our principal slash youth leader at the time came over to the school, called us all to the center. I remember sitting around and we had a prayer for what was happening to our country at that time. And then I remember him turning the story on the radio or whatever he had it on, and all the whole entire school's just crowded around listening to what's going on, and it was interesting but devastating at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was the precursor to it. And then I mean I did have I would say a not necessarily troubled childhood, but I grew up a little bit different. We grew up not having the most of everything. My mom and dad did their very best. My dad was I wouldn't say fully crippled, but my dad had artificial hips. To this day, he's had 6 hip replacements. But he worked in a factory, worked his tail off. But growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of money. We didn't have a whole lot of anything. Um, Prior to this, my mom and dad both had dropped out of high school, so they were married at a very young age. And so I would say we grew up. I wouldn't say poverty level, but pretty close to that level. And we grew up in a trailer court, and with that comes a lot of baggage. And so I learned to fight and scrap, and I was a little angry young man. And so that was another part that kind of led me. I lived a undisciplined life, and I needed to discipline myself.
Okay. You're cutting out a little bit. Are you still there? You're cutting out a little bit.
So senior year of high school.
Can you hear me? And it looks like he's cutting out a little bit. We're gonna have to see if we've lost Bruce or if he can get back on. Bruce, are you there?
I, I am here. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on here.
Hey, that's okay. You just froze up a little bit, and I said this to you beforehand. This is one of the reasons why we don't bother editing, because this sort of thing happens, man. Everybody knows that there's Wi-Fi and Zoom and things go on. You know what I mean? So we're good. If you can back up a little on your story, that would be great.
Oh,
Um, just
okay.
from wherever you think you ended, because I think we lost you maybe 30 seconds ago.
Okay. So
Your
let's
dad
see.
had
I grew up.
yeah, your dad
Go
had
ahead.
the replaced hips. I think it was one
Yeah.
of the
So
last
my
things
dad
I heard.
had art. Okay. So my dad had artificial hips, and it played a big role in my dad. I mean, he couldn't really do a whole lot as far as physically goes, and he worked his tail off in a factory. My dad actually worked 2 jobs. He worked for a hospital, local hospital, a night shift, and worked a day shift at the factory. So growing up in a trailer park, it was a little bit different. We got made fun of a lot going on the school bus and just little things like that. So, like I said, I grew up and learned to scrap and cause a lot of trouble. So with that, that was another thing. I knew that I was living an undisciplined life. I was out of control. I got suspended from school and just different aspects there. And I knew that that wasn't leading me to a correct path that I wanted to live. So I ended up going to military school my senior year of high school. I went to the Michigan Youth Challenge Academy in Battle Creek, Michigan. And from there, I had some of the best. As a matter of fact, I still stay in contact with one of my drill instructors there today. Staff Sergeant Smith was an incredible man. He played an incredible role in guiding me to the military. Um, so being there, I knew that, man, they, there was so much structure, and I thrive in structure. Even to this day, I thrive in structure. So he man, he would call a smoke session. He would smoke our tails, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Like from a physical aspect and just the fact that everything was so regimented. I went in there with a good friend of mine from our local church, who also had a very troubled childhood too, and we became, of course, we were best friends already, but we became so close. We were bunkmates. We did everything together. We lived there together, and we even tried to join the military together. So when we graduated military school, I went from being just a general recruit to marching the entire class out on stage as the first sergeant of the company. So it was
That's awesome.
incredible. I loved it. And that's kind of what led me into the military there.
That's awesome. That's a great story. That's awesome. Now, when you got into the military, was it a natural fit for you? I mean, did you kind of just blend right in, or were there some things that you had to overcome, some culture shock?
Oh no. Military school had already broke that culture shock to me.
Okay.
So to be honest with you, I actually thought I've told everybody this. I went in as infantry, so that's called 11 Bravo for those that don't know. I went in with 11B1P contract, which is just a pending contract for a Ranger contract there. I believe now they call it an open contract or something else. I don't remember exactly what it's called. Um, so if I can take just a short step back, so I actually was joining the Marine Corps. I got out of military school. All of the drill instructors there were Marine Corps drill instructors, except for one. And so I was like, man, I love this. I loved, the tenacity. I loved how they carried themselves. I loved everything about it. So I went to the recruiting station to join the military or join the Marine Corps. And when I went in there, it was me and my best friend Aaron. We were going to join buddy system together. And when I told them, like, I didn't want to join conventional, there's nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to do something a little bit different. Um, when I told them I want to go recon or force recon or something of that nature, they kind of laughed at me. And I'm like, well, I don't know what's so funny because you can join the Navy with a SEAL contract, right? You guys still got to go through the whole training course. You can join the Army with an SF contract. You can join the Air Force with a PJ contract, pararescue jumper. And, there's all these different special operations groups that you can join. You still have to go through the pipeline. So why couldn't I do that? And they're like, you got to go to the needs of the Marine Corps. So I walked out of there, went across the hall, went straight to the Army. And I originally looked at an 11 X-ray, which is a special forces contract. And when they told me about the Rangers, I'm like, that's it. That's what I want to do. So I went in with 11 Bravo with a 1P contract pending a Ranger contract. And man, it was awesome. So
I,
no
I
culture
love that.
shock.
I
Yes.
love that. Right now, I got to tell you, okay, among my listeners, and I know a lot of these guys personally, all my Army guys are like just like cheering over here, right, giving it up, and all my Marine guys have blood coming out of their ears right now.
Oh, yeah.
So, because I know there's no love lost, man. But yeah, that's awesome. I love that part of the story. Go ahead, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I had to do a shout out to what I know is happening to my listeners as we speak.
Oh, yeah. No, no worries at all. So you talked to culture shock, and man, I got some basic training. And of course, military school I thought was extremely harder. Um, they had already whipped me in shape. My PT scores were through the roof. So everything was just, it was just a piece of cake. It was just, I was already disciplined. I already knew all the movements. I knew, how to stand at parade rest. I knew how to move exactly when to move. I knew exactly what to say when to do it. I knew to move fast. They didn't have to tell me twice to do anything. I knew exactly, man, when they say to do something, you do it. And I already knew that you're never going to meet any time hack that they give you either. Right? They tell you to do something, you got this much time, you're never going to meet it, but give 100%. And so none of that stuff was a culture shock to me. I thought it was super easy.
Well, how long did it take you to make the Rangers?
So you got to go through basic AIT, which is AIT is your advanced individual training, which is your infantry training. From there, you go to jump school, which now they do it in reverse, and I'll explain that in a second. But you went to jump school next, and then you go to the Ranger Indoctrination Program. That's what I went through back in the day, which is called RIP. Now it's called RASP, Ranger Assessment and Selection Process. So to do all that together, it's just shy of a year. I don't remember the exact time frame.
Nice.
There was so many people at the time. Of course, it was just after 9/11. So I was actually in 2003. So I mean, you're talking 2 years after the big incident happened.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so there was a massive influx. So even at airborne school, there was a big holdover. So I think I waited 2 weeks before I even went into jump school. So I'm in a holdover program, waiting to go to airborne. Then I made it to airborne, did my time there, went to RIP holdover. And then I remember sleeping at RIP holdover. There's so many people. We shared the same barracks with the classes that were going on and the holdover. And so the ones that had the classes had the beds. The ones that didn't have the classes were sleeping on floors. And we had so many people quitting then just because it was cold. They're laying on floors, sleeping. People are climbing over everybody. It was a packed house. It was
Yeah.
crazy. So
Nice. Okay. How long were you in then?
4 years, so I did 03 to 07.
Okay.
Um, so not I didn't stay very long, but
Were you deployed actively as a ranger that entire time?
yes, sir. So I did 2 tours in Iraq, 1 tour in Afghanistan. Yes,
Wow.
sir.
Wow. Um, Thank you for your service. I'm sure you
Yes,
hear that
sir.
all the time. It coming from me, I hope you know that's real. That's not easy time, brother. Right there. I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of guys that I hold very close to me, and those are not easy deployments.
No, they're not. But again, no, they're not easy. But we knew what we were getting into, right? Joining the military at that time frame, there was no getting out of it. It's not like you're going to join and spend 4 or 5 years, 6 years, just get college, walk out, and you're done. We knew,
Right.
I knew immediately. And when we chose our units, so graduating RIP, you get to pick first, second, and third Ranger Battalion. There's only 3 battalions, and we knew first bat was going next. So I immediately I want first I didn't want to stay there with third bat because I'd been on Sand Hill, Fort Benning, Georgia for so long already. I did not want to stay there and be around all the new recruits continuously, all the RIP classes, airborne classes, all that stuff. I'm like, I got to get out of here. And I didn't want to go to Washington, Fort Lewis, Washington, because it's always raining and stuff there. And I'm like, I'd rather be close to the ocean. So I'm going to go to First Bat. And it's beautiful there. Savannah, Georgia is amazing. So I chose there also knowing that they were the very next ones to go out again, too. So,
Wow. Okay. Um, I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about, from over there, that influenced you. You were already a devout follower of Christ before you entered the military. Is that correct?
yes and no. So, yes, yeah, that's it. I'm glad you actually asked that.
There we
So,
go.
um, yes, I mean, I was born and raised in the church. And this is where it's kind of tough. So, I was born and raised in the church, been baptized, filled with the Holy Ghost, all that stuff. But I didn't have a true desire. I didn't have it for myself, right? I did it. I attended church twice on Sundays, every Tuesday, every Thursday, but I didn't really have that relationship. And I didn't know this really until many years later of how important that is, to be honest with you. So I moved out of my house at the age of 16, um, was pretty much independent, very independent. So I was born and raised in the church. Like I said, I was kind of forced to go to a Christian school. And I say forced because we didn't have a whole lot of money, but my parents were saving money for a vacation. And we had all this money sitting in this pot. I say a lot. It was just enough for us to go on vacation. And there's 5 of us kids, plus my mom and dad. So 7 of us living in a 2 bedroom trailer. So you can imagine how tough this was. And we had this money in this pot. We were going to go on a vacation. We hadn't been on vacation in a long time. And this is not a slander towards my parents in any capacity at all. So I hope that nobody takes it that way. This is just how this was the cards that my parents were dealt. So here now we go to church one night and they tell us that we're going to open up this Christian school. And so my parents came home and they wanted the best for us. And my dad said, hey, we don't have a whole lot of money, but I'm going to do whatever we can, but I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Would you rather go to the Christian school or go on this vacation? And I was like, vacation. Raise my hand. I'm the first one. I'm ready for a vacation. Of course, I told you kind of my lifestyle. My brother and sister out trumped me and they said they want to go to the Christian school. So that's what we ended up doing. Um, and we ended up getting sponsors through the church to help pay for our schooling and stuff like that. So now I tell you all that to show you like I was born and raised in the church, spent all my life until I left for the military going to church for the most part. Went to a Christian school. You would think that those two right there, you're just destined to be a Christian the rest of your life. And it's not true. Um, just because it's not a once and done. I ask for forgiveness, I repent, do all this stuff, and boom, now I've got this long life, lasting relationship with Jesus Christ. If that was the case, then, that'd be great, but it doesn't work that way. It's the same in a marriage. You don't say I do, and after that, you don't live that life as one anymore. And you did the first day when you said I do, but if you never show of love and affection, you don't have that communication piece with your spouse, and you don't show her that you truly love her and she's the one, that marriage ain't going to last long. And it's the same thing in your walk with Christ. And so here I am. I'm in the military now. You talk about culture shock. You asked me that at the beginning. Was it a culture shock? No, not when it came to the discipline and all that stuff. But the next culture shock came when I got to my unit. I never drank ever my entire lifestyle as a teenager. I never done a drug, never done anything. And that's a blessing by itself. Going to the military, that is the lifestyle. We knew we were getting ready to deploy. I make it to my unit for the very first time. And man, not only did they beat the tar out of me, but then they took me out that night, and it's like you drink or else type mentality. And so from that day moving forward, alcohol became a part of my life. And then church was not even a thought. Then you're introduced to so many other things. I had never seen pornography in my entire life, and it's plastered everywhere in the barracks.
Sure.
And so now here I'm a young man, and I am married. I didn't tell you that, so I don't know if you want me to back up a hair and fill you in on that. So
We can go back to that. You can just keep going where you're going, and we'll definitely circle back around to your marriage, brother.
okay, so I'm in the barracks, and now I'm introduced to all these different types of things, different lifestyles, and so Christ wasn't in my forefront, to say the least. So the next 4 years, I lived a complete different lifestyle. And so that led me down a road that would be a long struggle for many years to follow. So that was like a huge kicker to me. So going back to your question, have I always been a believer or been a follower of Christ? Have I been a believer? Yes. Have I been actively follower? Absolutely not.
Wow. I've heard some of these stories, obviously, but I can see how much it impacted you, just by the way you're telling the story. So I appreciate you sharing that. Was that, I just out of curiosity, was that one of the things that led to a shorter term? Like, hey, I've done my time and time to get out, was because you wanted to get away from that, or did that play a role at all?
It played a role because of my marriage, which is what I was going to lead to next.
There
So
we go.
I did get a little bit ahead. So I graduated RIP in, I want to say it was the beginning of November. I think it was like and I would have to go back in the dates, but I believe it was the 1st or 2nd of November.
Right.
And then they give me a 2 week break before I go to my actual unit. So 2 weeks of leave before I have to report to my unit. I had been talking, so I met my wife when she was 9 and I was 11. And I'm singing in a choir at church. This new family walks in from Indiana, and now they're going to be coming to our church. She sees me, I see her, and I thought she was hot stuff. She thought I was hot stuff, and that was kind of how it went. And we dated off and on for many years. She then we took a break for a little while, and this is about the age of 16 when I ended up moving out of my house. And she was dating another guy for quite a while, almost 4 years to be honest. And um, during this time, I moved out, kind of did my own thing for a short period of time, and then when I came back around just before I left to go to the military, we started talking again. And I would say from basic AIT jump school, we had flip phones back then. I actually bought her a phone before I left. And so, I mean, you're talking texting on a flip phone. It was so hard. So we just called each other. We called each other quite a bit. I didn't have a phone to call during basic or AT back then, but once I made it to jump school, I could carry my phone and RIP. I didn't get to carry a phone in RIP, but I had it for breaks and stuff like that on weekends. So we stayed in contact. Well, we ended up getting to the point where we're like, hey, let's just get married. So I graduated RIP, and we come back home and we end up getting married on a Monday. So her parents planned the entire thing, put everything together. I'm talking, I just showed up. That's it. I drove 17 hours straight through. I showed up, I didn't even wear my uniform, military uniform. I just wore a suit. They had already had the suit for me and everything. I put the suit on, put my tie on, and pretty much walked in there for rehearsal and then the wedding. So they had planned and prepped everything. They did an amazing job. Uh, we get married. We spend the next couple days together. Now, we were broke as a joke. I didn't have no money. I think we had $5 when after we got married, we went back to her parents' house and went through all the cards and stuff so that we can actually go on a honeymoon. And it's actually a funny story. I had a Dodge Durango. They tell you never buy a vehicle on a military base or near a military base. And I was that guy that did that. Probably like a 19% interest rate, big old payments on it. And that's why I was broke. So I drove 17 hours, get there. I have $5 left, and we go through all the cards. Luckily, my wife was part of a good church. It's a church I grew up in, and people blessed us really well. We went on our little honeymoon, and I was so excited. I left my fog lights on. My vehicle battery dies. I have to call her father-in-law to come jump me the next day. So it was hilarious, and they still remind me of that today. So we're together for a couple of days. And then I've got to make that long journey back to Savannah, Georgia. I've got all my belongings. I mean, I've been living out of bags since basic AIT, jump school, all that stuff. So I got all my personal belongings there. I jump ship, go back to Savannah. She stays home with her parents. And then I show up to my unit. We spend 2 to 3 weeks, basically that introductory phase, getting to know them, got all my paperwork and stuff done. And then we started looking for base housing or off base housing. We ended up going off base. And that's kind of how it went down. She came down, her parents brought her, and we went to an off base condo, basically like apartment complex right outside of base. And that's what we did. And we had maybe 3 weeks from the time that she got there till the time I ended up shipping off for my first deployment. And so we found out I must have been fertile myrtle. She got pregnant right away. And so I'm literally leaving for my first deployment. And we've been on call for a little while, they told us. And so we had to stay close to base. We had to have our phones on us. And we get the call that, yep, you're shipping out here in the next 18 hours, whatever it was. So I moved to the Army Lodge on post to be close. And she tells me that she's pregnant. I was super excited. So all that unfolds. And then back to your question, what really led me to getting out of the military is we, by this time now, I've gone through 3 deployments. We have another kid on the way. My lifestyle was not living up to what she's used to. She's born and raised in a Pentecostal home as well. And so was I. I'm living the life with the guys. I've got this camaraderie. I'm loving life. I'm bouncing from overseas back home. Responsibility is completely different. And I absolutely loved what I was doing. And so that was a battle. I call her from Germany on my third deployment. I'm coming home, and a couple of my friends were re-upping, and I wanted to re-up with them. So I said, hey, they're offering a large lump sum bonus. If I re-enlist right here in Germany, I can have the cash bonus in the bank by the time I get home. It's only 4 more years. And she said something to me along the lines of like, if you do that, I'm going home and you could stay the rest of your contract here. And when you want to see us, you can come see us. And that kind of that hit home. Not then. I was frustrated. I was upset. I was very self-centered at the time. I get home, and then when my daughter's crying because she hadn't recognized me, that's when it kind of resonated with me, and I knew then, like, yeah, this is time for me to make a change. So
Ouch.
that was the deciding factor. Yeah.
Great decision.
Yes, it was. I
Yeah.
didn't believe it was the best decision immediately. It took me a couple years to realize it, but yes.
Good for you. Seriously. I mean, yeah, I hate having to hear that, that you had to go through that because I can't even imagine, as a father, um, what that must have felt like, having your heart ripped out like that. But sometimes it takes that to make us wake up as men and go, you know what? We're supposed to be serving a bigger purpose than just ourselves, So
Oh yeah.
you got that, brother. Um, so you make the decision. You're leaving the military. You're staying with your wife. You got your kids. You're invested in that. Um, obviously we're able to, but what was the process of you coming sort of back into alignment with, Christ and your beliefs and that kind of thing after you got out of there?
Oh boy. It was a long road. I can walk you down that road. It might take you a little while, but I'll start with I got out of the military. I was very upset. You know that was my life. I absolutely loved everything, and I didn't think I'd ever find anything to replace that, right? I know now, like, I struggled with an identity crisis. That was what it really was. My identity was in Ranger Battalion. I carried that on my shoulders, and I absolutely loved it. And I thought, that's all I'm going to be the rest of my life. I get home. Um, we start to move into a new home. We were under renovations. My wife had found a house for us back in Michigan. She had already moved home. I stayed there for the next 6 months, um, out processing, doing that type of stuff. I did get a second job immediately. Actually, I got two jobs. I worked once the guys knew. It was weird how it worked. Once the guys knew that I wasn't reenlisting and I only had a short period of time left, we are such a rapid deployment unit that there's never a stopping moment, especially when we were in the heart of the war at that time. These guys would deploy over and over and over again. So the time you come home, you get a couple of weeks off, recoup, see your family, and then you do a round robin of training all over the place. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Polk, Louisiana, and you just start this round robin of training. And you're doing everything from airfield seizures to requalifications, day, night qualifications, and different tactics, movements, and jumping, keeping your quals and stuff up. And it's just, you're all over the place. You're doing cross training because we're part of JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, and USASOC, United States Army Special Operations Command. So we work with multiple other units. The 160th SOARs, our pilots, they fly us all over the place. So they fly us in training. They do all kinds of stuff, and we just stay in this constant revolving cycle of training. And then just before you deploy again, they're like, hey, take a quick little break, see your family, say hi, do this type of stuff, and then boom, you're gone again. And it's just a revolving cycle over and over and over again. And so they knew I wasn't going to be there. There's no sense for me to hang around. So they're like, hey, come check in with us every so often. Make sure you have your phone on you. We can get a hold of you. You'll start your out processing. They give me a date to start out processing. Make sure you get all your gear and stuff together. My wife's already heading home. I'm there by myself. So I went and worked for, it was weird. I worked for DSI Security Company, guarding the ships in Savannah. They're loading stuff on the ships and stuff. I did that at night, and I worked construction during the day. I had a great friend there, Elkin Marin. He owned Marin Enterprise, a construction company, and I worked construction with him on these historic homes and stuff like that. So here I'm doing all this, making extra money, getting things prepped and ready to go home. My wife found a house there. Her mom and dad helped get everything there. The Army moved everything. I lived in a camper on Elkin's property. The Army, we loaded up the semis and they shipped everything home, unpacked everything back in Michigan. I've heard about that forever too, because my wife, they moved us like 3 times and I never once had to show up to move. So that's not good. And so my wife's back at home. She's pregnant again with our third child. They're moving everything in. And yeah, it was crazy. And so now I'm struggling mentally, psychologically, just going like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go home. I've got these kids. I got this new house. I've got nothing to fall back on. I start looking for jobs, and I apply for a security officer job in the nuclear industry. This is crazy. Show up. It was through a place called Michigan Works, and you got to show up there, do some little testing. You apply
Yep. And we lost Bruce.
in my back.
You're back. Yep. We lost you for a minute. Hey, we're going to get
I
through this, man. Adapt and overcome. No big
I
deal.
I apologize. I'm not sure what's going on. I got full service, so it's something's kicking me out. I apologize though.
Don't worry about it. You just keep right on going, man. We're gonna push right through.
Okay, so I went to Michigan Works. I applied for the
Yeah.
job. I actually showed up in a suit and tie. I printed resumes off, and everybody there that had their little badge that said American Electric Power on it, I went around, shook their hands, and handed everybody a resume, and took the testing. There's over 500 people there, and I physically know this because we talked about it once I ended up getting hired and the whole process. I mean, there was rooms full of people pending, waiting to do the testing, people outside waiting to come in. And so I'm like, there's no way they're hiring 7 people. There's no way I'm getting hired in this job. And I get the call and show up for the interview and land the job. And so that was the start. I show up to training. This is really crazy. I'll share some of this because this is all part of leading up to how long it took for me to really get that relationship with Jesus Christ again. Um, Mind you, we're back in Michigan. My wife's going back to the same church that we both kind of grew up in. Um, I'm very absent at this point. I'm home in Michigan, but I'm not really attending church. I'm not really being a part of the family, that type of stuff. I land this job, thinking this is going to be great. That's one less stress I got to worry about. Um, I get in there, find out there's tons of military veterans and people in there. I went in, and this isn't a pat on my back, but I didn't tell anybody what I did. I actually joked around, told people, yes, I was in the army, I was a cook, and they laughed at me. And I'm in training for this security officer job. It is an armed security job, so it's 13 weeks of training. Pretty good stuff. Different firearms training from pistol, rifle, long rifle, all that type of stuff. And every 3 years in the nuclear industry, they do a revisit from the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They come around and they actually test the defensive strategy of every nuclear power plant. Well, it just happened to be, I got hired in there in 2007. I'm still in training. It just happens to be that year, 2007, when this big drill comes out. And I'm talking, these are huge drills. They're pass or fail. So I'm in training. These guys show up from the contractors from the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they are working as consultants for the site. So they're going to show up doing a pre-visit prior to the CAV team, composite adversary force, to show up on site and attack the power plant. These guys show up. I'm happen to be wearing a T-shirt that says First Ranger Battalion on it. These two knuckleheaded guys come up to me and just start ripping into me, poking me in the chest, trying to embarrass me. I'm talking. There's a room full of people, and they're like, "What is this shirt?" And like knife handed me in the chest. It was hilarious. I'm like, "It's just a shirt," And I'm like taken back for a second, like, "What in the world's going on?" They start drilling me, and long story short, they were just testing to see why I was wearing a shirt and if I was legit. And we started talking, sharing like kind of like locations, deployments, this type of stuff. Find out that it's Major Tom Greer, who's passed away now. Major Tom Greer was commander of Delta Force, and I was deployed with him in 2004, and he was running the TOCs, the Tactical Operations Center. He's a New York's best time author, was numerous books, goes by a code name Adult and Fury. Great listening if you like military law enforcement books, that type of stuff.
Mhm.
And so he's drilling me, and I'm like, find out who this guy is. I'm like, this is crazy. And he's like, what are you doing here? And so that kind of led me. I jumped straight into a new, basically the Force on Force program there. I've got another guy coming on to my podcast here in a couple of days. Actually, no, he's recording his tomorrow. Him and I, they called us Batman and Robin, and we ran the Force on Force program for years there. We were the pilot program for the entire nuclear nuclear industry. And in 2010, for a new pilot program to integrate local law enforcement, We both went to SWAT level one training with Barron County Sheriff's Department. We did all this type of stuff to integrate local law enforcement for response to the nuclear facility during the drills. And then we went around and tested all kinds of other sites, doing vulnerability assessments and threat assessments. So I say all that to say I got into this and I just ate it up. Like I poured my life into the nuclear industry. And again, my wife's going to church. She's raising the kids. I'm with my bros again, right? That brotherhood again. And
Yep.
I am just thriving in this job. I'm moving up through the ranks extremely fast, getting promotions, and just pouring my life into this and drinking, doing all this stuff. And so I would show up to church and people would think I had everything together, but I would never participate. I'd show up and not be a participant in any means at all. I was very absent in the church. So I'd show up and didn't want to be there. I'm somewhere else mentally. I was checked out. And then 2016 came around. Three things happened. 2016, I went to Minnesota Power Plant and I took another guy with me. His name is John Speakout. John Speakout was a former Army guy and also did 2 tours with Blackwater as a contractor, and he's working at the nuclear power plant. And he kind of idolized me in a sense. He looked up to me. I thought, man, the dude was great. I joked around with him. I called him 8 Mile. He was just a gangster type guy, always wearing a hoodie, just looked super cool, tattoos everywhere. And he wanted to go with me, so I took my wife with me. He came and he brought his fiance with him. And while we're there, we're doing a late night drill. It's probably 2 a.m. Drills are over. We just got back from the bar and we're driving home. And he starts to share like some struggles and issues that he's having in his life. And here I am, I'm in the car in the seat right next to him, and he's being very transparent and very vulnerable at this point. And I'm not ready for this. So I turn that into a joking manner and we start laughing and joking about what's going on and transition us from a very serious conversation into a joke. And we get back to the power plant, and I'm a trainer by this time in my career there. So I'm running a range this particular day, and we're one man short. We're supposed to have 12 guys to show up for the training team, and one man did not show up this day. And we looked everywhere for him. We called. It ended up being John. We kept calling. I'm like, man, we got to get moving on. So the shift accommodated us being short. Got done with our training evolution, and I still remember distinctly this day coming off the range, shutting the air handler off, and walking to my office. And a female trainer comes through the double doors, and you can see her eyes are puffy, and she's looked like she's been crying. She's like, Bruce, can you come outside? And I've got Justin Holloway and Kenny Hunt to my left and right, former Army and Marine Corps guys. And we walk outside, and this trainer just wraps me up. He gives me a big old hug, and she says, man, we found John, and he just committed suicide. And my mind goes back to 2 weeks prior. And this guy was asking, looking for help. And I wasn't there to help him. And so that hit me super hard. This is a Tuesday. And my family's in church. My wife's in church. I've got my kids, they're all in church. And I leave and I go down to the bar. We shut training down for the day. The whole entire site just accommodates us extremely well. They tell us no more training for the day, none of this stuff. And we shut the range down and we leave, but we go to the bar right down the road, the sandbar. And we're drinking in remembrance of this guy, right? Some great remembrance. And we're throwing down and just, talking about all the things that we remember about him. And I leave the bar and I am just not, I'm toasty. And so here I'm doing something stupid again. I'm driving, but I go to the church parking lot and I sit there while my family's in church, and I'm wrecked. And I'm going to say the guy's name, Paul Smith. He's a pastor now. Paul Smith was on shift. Paul Smith was also John's best friend. Those two came through training together, and I grew up with Paul Smith. I went to the military school with Paul Smith's brother, Aaron Smith. Paul Smith was like a brother to me, and he's quite a few years younger than me. He was a brand new person hired there. He ends up leaving shift because they shut everything down, and he goes to church. Here I am, I'm wrecked in a parking lot, and Paul comes up to my car and he loves on me, man. He tells me, it's gonna be all right. God loves you, and he's just there trying to help me. And I can't even build up the audacity to even walk into the church. I was hurting. I knew where my strength was, and I couldn't even make it into the door. I leave and I go home. My family comes home from church. They know something's going on. I'm wrecked. And this led me down a long road for the next couple of months. I tried to drink everything away. I tried to self medicate in a lot of different ways. I was already doing it, but now I just did it even more. Tom Greer, I told you about, man, he was like a incredible man. He's a big mentor in my life. And during this same time, this is all 2016, we're back to our force on force. We're there for another evaluated event. Tom Greer's here. I'm climbing through the ranks. I'm doing incredible things by this time, or at least I thought in the corporate world. I'm leading as a lead adversary controller for the force on force. I've got guys from Congress. I've got all the NRC representatives in the room, and I'm doing the briefings. And I'm the guy that's the the spokesperson for the site versus the consultants and everybody else. So everything has to run through me. And man, I just think I'm just pounding myself on the chest. Of course, I'm still self-medicating from all this stuff. No one knows it. And Tom's there, but Tom ends up he looks different this time. He had lost a lot of weight. And I made some jokes with him, like, man, you cutting back, you counting carbs, just doing whatever, not knowing that he was sick. We were getting ready to have lunch or dinner. We had dinner plans with him the following, I want to say like a Thursday or something like that, sometime during the week. I show up to work that day. We've been working 15, 16-hour days all night long. And so we have to offset. I show up to work. Tom's always early. And so am I. I walk in and Tom's not there that day. So I asked Tom's right hand man, which was Kip Rowe, former first bat guy as well. I'm like, Kip, where's Tom at? And he's like, dude, he got on a plane to go home. He's super sick. Something's not right. So Tom's wife gets my number from Tom's phone. She texts me and to tell me that, hey, you're going to get text messages from this number from now on. This is how you can reach us. Tom's going to go offline. He's very sick. He's got stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oh,
He had passed away within like a week. So he had flew home. He's got twin daughters. He went home to be with his family and stuff. He was hurting. He's in serious pain. Gets there and it happened so rapid. And so again, cut this guy who's a mentor. I just had John speak out. Now I've got Tom Greer. And I just go back to self-medicating. And by this time, my wife is telling me, she's like, you got to get this fixed or we're going to have to leave. Like you're wrecking the house. I'm an angry mess. I'm struggling so bad. And this struggle period has been for a long time. It's been a buildup. Now I'm at that festering stage. And I end up in an inpatient treatment center for almost 4 months. So I use that to get myself realigned and back on track. And I thought that was going to be the fix. And it helped. It helped a little bit. I quit drinking alcohol. I've been clean since 2016. I haven't used any pills or anything in any capacity at all anymore. I don't even take any medications to this day. But when I left there, I just fell on my face again. I thought that, this was a fix all, cure all, and it wasn't. Well, I ended up going to another program shortly after that because my wife is like, this is literally the final straw. And we went to a marriage retreat. And that's what led me into the Mighty Oaks thing, which is a faith-based program. I went through that 5-day program and man, they poked me in the chest hard. And it was not breathing techniques, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive process therapy, EMDR, drugs, pills, anything. It was none of that. It was what I already knew. And it was that your only help and strength literally comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Man, I bawled like a baby that entire week. I just, it was uncontrollable. It was crazy. It gives me chills to this day when I think about it. I talk about it with friends. I get home. Before I even make it home, I'm texting guys in my church that, they had been friends of mine, and I isolated so much. I didn't think that I needed anybody. I thought I could do it all on my own. So I started texting guys like, man, I need you to be an accountability partner for me. And man, every single one of them without failure were like, yes, anything you need, I'll be there for you. Always been there for you, always praying for you. Just unreal responses. And that right there was the turning point. I get home. Did I still struggle? Yeah, not as bad anymore though. And the reason is I found out that when you have a true relationship, it requires work. And I had to put the work in. I had to put the reps in.
Right.
And that was the start of a mended marriage. It was the start of a mended relationship between me and my kids. It was the hard part was I walked away from the nuclear industry. So everyone asked, like, man, why would you walk away from a job at 6 figures a year doing what you loved? And my response it wasn't a help for me. That was a huge hindrance. I was around everybody that I loved, but I loved them for the wrong reasons. I was in a career that I dove into and poured my life into and would come home and destroy my family. The people that I love the most, I put my job, my career, my advancements, my accolades way higher than I put my own family. And yeah, that was a huge turning point in my life.
Wow. You're not alone, man. Uh,
Yeah.
you're not. You're not alone. I know you know that God's with you, but you're you're not alone. There are men out there who are dealing with this stuff too.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and I know that a lot of you guys, when you're dealing with it, when I dealt with my stuff, that's the hardest part. I think is that you feel like you're the only one that's ever gone through it, and the only one who's ever gonna go through it. And so there's a lot of shame there and stuff because you just feel like, how did I let this happen to me? You're not alone at
Yeah.
all, and I appreciate sharing that because there's more than one guy out there right now that's going to hear this and is hearing what you had to say about it.
Yes, sir.
Um, that's probably a great way to segue into the one other thing I wanted to ask you about, man, and that is your podcast. That you're putting together because you're talking to, first responders, you're talking to veterans, you're talking to guys who are having a lot of the same problems. Is this part of a penance? Is this part of a calling? What led you to start the podcast the way you're doing it?
Yeah, great question. So after struggling for so long, then I went to Mighty Oaks, and that was Mighty Oaks didn't save me. It was a relationship with Christ that did. That's what saved my life, literally. But through Mighty Oaks, God allowed me to go to Mighty Oaks to have somebody tell me over again, like, this is where your strength is. And so that was a turning point. So I then later became a part of Mighty Oaks as a team leader. And as I became a team leader, I got to witness over and over and over again, session after session, of hardened men from law enforcement, I'm talking gang units, to anything you can think of, running the streets, um, firefighters in and out of very, very extreme tragic situations, EMTs that see death every day, accidents, suicides, to anything you could think of, to law or to military that struggled with the same battles that I struggled with. And the end result is we all try to self medicate somehow. And so, with doing that, it leads to a life of destruction. And so by being a part of that and seeing this over and over and over again, I also got to see the flip side of how these men that were struggling, that came in that were so hard and calloused, broke and allowed God to change and alter the trajectory of their life. And now they are giving back. And so by doing that, I'm sitting here, I struggled for months. It had been something, if not a year, I've been battling like, should I do this or should I not? I think there's so much validity in getting these guys' stories out there that men that could relate, someone who says, man, that's what I'm struggling with. I didn't think anybody struggled with that. Or, man, I've done the same thing. I've messed up the same way, or this or that, or whatever. And I think that's a way of draw people in to let them know that, man, like you said, you're not alone. You're not alone in this fight. And there's so many men out there that are struggling with this. And it's not just men, it's women, it's kids, it's everything. And my struggle is, am I the guy to do this? And I kept beating myself up because I personally don't want to be the limelight. And I told you this earlier, like I want to be a quiet professional. I don't want to be the guy that sits out there and, everybody goes, oh man, I want to be just like that guy. I don't want you to be like me. I want to let you see the other side. I want you to see the struggles of all these men, but then not just see the struggle. This isn't an unshackled message. This is also the struggle, but then where restoration comes from. How do we get it? It's not through psychological, therapies. That's great. I believe that those are needed and necessary sometimes, but your true strength and true recovery comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. When you do that, it's full surrender. God, take all of this. The Bible says to cast your cares on him because he cares for you. And when you can literally let go of all that baggage, we call it the rucksack of life. We have this big rucksack we carry around and we stuff so much stuff in there and we never unpack it. We carry and carry and carry. And so I want people to know that it is okay. You can have these struggles, but now we got to get through that recovery process, unpack that, cast it down on God, and he will take care of it for you. And it's not going to be immediate. Don't think it's a microwave society where, hey, God, I'm sorry, forgive me. Here's my issues, blah, 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 whatever. And then tomorrow everything's better because it's not going to work that way. We've created such a microwave society, or we think we need that's what we believe it is anymore, and it's not. We have years of destruction. We ask for forgiveness. Well, with everything that we've done, there's always consequences, and just God's not going to take all the consequences away just because now I've repented and I want a better life. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so I just want to get this out there and hope that in me doing this, it will reach. If it reaches one, I love it. Praise God. If it reaches 100, reaches 100,000, that's what I want. I want to just reach a soul and get them to turn their life to Christ.
It's exactly how I started this one with those
That's
exact
awesome.
words. If you can help one guy, one man. Um, wow. Brother, I know you're new, into doing this and you've just got it started and, you've got a lot going on, but, you're going to make a big difference with this. Your podcast is going to make a big difference. It's going to, it seems from over here, it seems like you're being called to do this. And whether you want to call it penance or you want to call it, being called to help or whatever, however you want to package the thing. When you're doing it, does it feel like something you need
Oh yeah.
to do? Yeah, that's
Oh yeah.
exactly how I started this. It's not even a question of doing it, just it has to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Um, Thank you for sharing all of this today. I know that there's guys out there that are hearing everything coming out of your mouth, brother. I know they're going to want to tune in your podcast. Um, all of the stuff's going to be in the show notes, of course. It's called Ready to Fight. It's about discovering God as your Savior, basically, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One more. and then I'm going to let you go because I'm keeping you from your family and everything tonight. And man, you've really held up your end of the bargain here, brother. Um, but one more, and then we'll call it. And that is guys that are out there that are struggling. They're listening right now, and they're nodding their heads, going, "Man, I know, I'm having the same problems." What's one piece of advice you want to give somebody who's having the problems, hasn't done anything about them yet, is having the problems? They're your friend in the car seat next to you. They're the ones who are going, "I've got issues. I don't know what to do." What do you say to those men?
I would say the biggest thing is don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to open up. And if the first person doesn't listen, there's another that will. Never quit. Always know that you're not alone. You've said it. That's Mighty Oak's phrase, never fight alone. Someone is there. You've got to be willing to be vulnerable and transparent. And that's the hardest thing. Sometimes we can be so vague with our hurts. We want to open up, but we are so vague. And maybe the person you're trying to open up to was me, and they weren't willing to listen. They weren't willing to be that vulnerable or transparent. You've got to find somebody that will accept that vulnerability and help you seek that help, whether that's a biblical counselor, a pastor, a preacher, a church member, somebody of that nature. You've got to find help. Don't let it lead you down the next road because there's no turning back. And that's one thing that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life, is just knowing that someone was asking for help and I was not willing at that point. I needed help, but I wasn't willing to help someone else. And you don't want that weight on your shoulders. And the next thing I would say is no matter what, we're all human. You may not have someone like that was like me that wasn't willing to listen, but God's willing to listen. And when you can be vulnerable with God, God will never let you down. He will show up on time every time, and He will give you comfort and strength no matter what the situation is. So if you don't have a man that you can turn it over to in the physical, you have a man in the spiritual that is only the mention of His name away. And He will never, never let you down. And that's all I have.
It's beautiful. Thank you, man.
Yes, sir.
All right. Wow. Folks, Bruce Kimbrell, former Ranger, host of Ready to Fight. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and for helping all the guys that I'm pretty sure you just helped tonight. And thank you for helping all the guys that I know you're going to help with the project that you're spearheading now. I think you're on a great path right now, man, and power to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it. Folks, it's been another episode of Power Man Podcast. The reason we bring powerful men like this on to this podcast to talk about their struggles and how they've overcome is to make sure that you guys all know that if we can do it, you can too. And the reason we want to tell you that is because you've got value. You have worth, and you are worth it. You're worth the fight, and you're worth fighting for, man. So, guys, at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.